Hello, welcome to Summerfest Online 2020. Thank you very much for coming along to view these presentations. Just a quick reminder that we have a number of exhibitors in the exhibitors hall. If you want to go along and have a quick browse, maybe do some shopping, then we'd love to see you. And a quick reminder too about our wonderful sponsors, Yayo Hemp Products and Butte Island Cheese. They're also in the exhibitors hall and they'd love to see you too. If you've enjoyed the show, please remember this is a free event, and if you'd like to make a small donation, you'd be very welcome. Please go to the Friends of VegFest page to make a donation. And a reminder too, we have another show in November, London Online, and in next March, Plant Powered Expo. And you can find out all about that on VegfestUK. Thanks very much and enjoy the presentation.
Hello and welcome to the webinar on how to support your vegan client. I am Leila Dehghan and I'm thrilled to have you here. Whether you are a newly registered nutritionist, a dietitian, a GP, or just a curious fitness professional who wants to help their vegan clients, this webinar is for you. So let's get started. Veganism has skyrocketed in recent years. It is estimated that about 8% of the world population is vegan. In the UK, there are over 500,000 who call themselves vegan. There are also many who prefer to identify as plant-based. So that number may be larger, and it definitely keeps growing, which means that meeting a vegan or plant-based client is no longer uncommon. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has long taken the position that appropriately planned vegetarian and vegan diets are healthy and nutritionally adequate for individuals of all ages throughout their life cycle. Many vegans are motivated to learn more about their diet and adopt a healthy eating pattern. They look for advice and direction, and that is where your expertise as health professionals is required. So this webinar was created to help you. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have what you call a portfolio career. I was trained as a doctor and worked as a pediatric doctor in the UK before quitting for health reasons. Later, I became a personal trainer. And while working as a personal trainer, I became a person-centered counselor. However, after changing my own vegan diet to a whole food plant-based and seeing the benefits for myself, I wanted to learn more about nutrition and did my certificate in plant-based nutrition from the Cornell University. And that is when I decided to pursue a master's degree in clinical and public health nutrition at UCL. Currently, I'm a plant-based nutritionist. I'm on the advisory board of Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. I also co-facilitate the UK's first online university course in plant-based nutrition. And I have been vegan for 6 years. And as such, I have firsthand experienced the challenges a vegan may face. By the end of this webinar, you should be able to take a consultation with your vegan or plant-based client. I will show you how to address barriers to working with your vegan clients, how to offer them the support they need, and what nutrients you need to be mindful of. Let's get started. Building trust and rapport are the very first step in a relationship. As Susan Young, the author of The Art of Connection, says, trust and rapport are the heartbeat of business and the secret sauce for healthy relationships. Vegan clients already have a mistrust to healthcare professionals because they often believe that most of them don't share their views and won't agree with their diet choices. Furthermore, they believe that non-vegan healthcare professionals base their recommendations on papers and studies which are funded by the food industry. And because of that, they'll be biased against the vegan diet. Also, many vegans come to see a nutritionist or dietitian because their immediate family doesn't support their vegan diet choice. And sometimes it is the family who has urged them to seek professional advice. So how do you build rapport? Be curious and ask them questions. Why have they chosen a vegan lifestyle? Why is their vegan diet important to them? Or if they call themselves plant-based, ask them the reasons. Ask them about their motivation. These sort of questions let your client know that you are trying to understand them, that you're genuinely interested in them and their viewpoint, that you're not relying on messages and cliches you have read and heard in the mainstream media, that you want to meet them where they are. By showing empathy, you help them to open up to you, which is really important. After all, you don't want them to withhold vital information about their diet habits or any symptoms they may be experiencing. The more they feel accepted by you, the more they trust your advice and guidance. Now, after talking to your client, you might feel that your client is following a vegan diet because it is the latest thing and trendy, and all their friends are doing it. And even if that is the case, it is not our place to call them out on it and judge their decision. Our role is to give them nutritional advice, not to question their ethical choices and lifestyles. As healthcare professionals, we want to ensure that our clients get their advice from us and not from lay people or some random Facebook group or some celebrity on Instagram. You want to go into the conversation with your client feeling truly curious and not wanting to bring them on your side and making them change their mind about their vegan diet. And when your clients feel that, they will be willing to openly talk to you. They may even disclose any relapses they might have had. Remember, if they talk about a relapse, don't ask whether they are missing meat in their diet or whether after they had eaten some animal products, they felt better in themselves. And of course, you don't want to ask whether they have changed their mind about being vegan. Some vegans may succumb to family pressures and have some meat or dairy on occasions, especially if they are new to their vegan lifestyle. I have also met a few vegans who had a relapse when they were drunk, again, especially if they are new to the diet and lifestyle. And as you can imagine, they judge themselves and they are often overwhelmed by feelings of guilt. Our role is to show empathy and to actively listen and to reflect on what they share with us by paraphrasing. This way our clients feel safe, not judged, and then we can help them actually to make sense of the relapse, and we can help them to come up with ways to deal with similar situations in future. Obviously, after having asked you about your client's motivation, you'll get an idea about the kind of diet they follow. Veganism, as defined by the Vegan Society, is a way of living which seeks to exclude all forms of exploitation of animals for food as far as it is possible and practicable. People, however, may go through stages of behavior change before going completely vegan. Many might move through the stages of preparation and action a few times. Some may even cut out animal products from their diet in stages. For example, they remove red meat first before removing chicken, and then they finally ditch dairy. So make sure to ask where in their journey your client is and what foods are acceptable. For example, honey. Although most vegans would avoid honey for ethical reasons, there are a few who may be okay with consuming it. Then there are those who have adopted a plant-based diet for health reasons. And they often follow a whole food plant-based diet, which means that they abstain from animal products as well as any processed foods. So that means no white rice, no white bread, no junk food. And some even avoid oils because oils are considered processed. And as mentioned before, some are plant-based and not vegan, which means that they may be okay with the occasional dairy products or eggs when eating out. Some people who call themselves plant-based may in fact be flexitarian, and they may even consume meat on rare occasions. Some are vegan or plant-based to reduce their environmental impact, which is important to know because those clients only consume local products which are in season. Knowing what foods are acceptable to your vegan and plant-based clients makes it easier when giving nutritional advice. Ask about your client's environment and their support system. Find out who in their family is responsible to do the grocery shopping and who does the cooking. Is that person supportive of their vegan diet? You need to know who in their immediate family and friend circle supports your client and their decision to go vegan. Often vegans face discouragement from their immediate family members, and that can affect their eating habits. For example, let's say your client lives with their parents who don't agree with their diet choice. So the parents might actually refuse to buy vegan products, or they might refuse to cook vegan meals. Or your client could be sharing an accommodation with others and live with housemates. And if those housemates are not supportive, they could actually create obstacles by making fun of your client's vegan meals or by displaying animal products all over the kitchen. And then, the kitchen becomes an unpleasant area which your client might avoid. Being non-judgmental also means not assuming anything. Ask what facilities your client has access to. Do they have an oven, a microwave? But most importantly, ask your client whether they have any experience in cooking. A client told me that before going vegan, she would simply roast a beef or chicken and then add some vegetables. And now as a new vegan, she felt lost in the kitchen. You know, modern life can be quite busy and stressful, and many of us have never really learned any cooking skills. Lastly, but not least, you want to find out what your client's weekly budget for food is. And before giving advice about buying organic, we need to know whether they can actually afford it. So try to find out as much as possible about the barriers and enhancers which are involved in your clients maintaining their vegan diet. The more detailed questions you ask, the easier it will be later when you're giving advice. Are there any other food restrictions? Make sure to ask your clients about that. Ask whether they are avoiding any foods. And if that is the case, find out whether it was diagnosed by a healthcare professional. But even if it is a self-diagnosed food sensitivity, we don't want to dismiss that. Ask what symptoms they have noticed and how long they have been avoiding that food. The same goes if they're on a gluten-free diet. Find out whether it is celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity, or whether they just avoid gluten for some other reason. There are also some other factors to consider, like choosing the right word. You don't want to alienate your client by calling them vegan when they would rather be called plant-based, or vice versa. Simply ask them what they like to be referred to, vegan or plant-based. This is another way to show them that you're open-minded while allowing them to actually express themselves and their beliefs. Also, watch your body language. Often our facial expression and involuntary body language can say a lot about how we feel. So even if you say the right things, but your face shows signs of shock or disapproval, your client will pick on it. Lastly, always aim to educate your vegan client. Most vegans face questions from their friends and family or from colleagues at work. They're asked the same questions over and over, and it can be quite stressful. So clearing up their common misconceptions about a vegan diet will not only put their mind at ease, but also helps them to talk to their family and friends with confidence. And this brings us to the nutrients we need to be mindful of. Where do vegans get their protein from? This is by far the most commonly asked questions. As far as the quantity is concerned, studies have repeatedly demonstrated that we are all exceeding our protein intakes, and that also applies to vegans. Data published from the EPIC Oxford study compared the protein intake between meat eaters, pescatarians, lacto-ovo, and vegans. It looked at almost 30,000 subjects, and as you see, the protein intake as percentage of energy consumed exceeds the recommended 12% in all groups, even in the vegan group. And when we look at the protein intake as gram per kg body weight per day, the recommendation is 0.75 gram per kg. And again, all diet groups exceed that recommendation. This data also matches the findings of the Adventist Health Study, which shows that all diet groups, including vegans, are consumed above the required 42 grams of protein per day. So when it comes to the quantity of protein, it's really not an issue for any of us. But what about the quality? Of the total 20 amino acids, there are 9 essential amino acids that our body cannot produce, and we have to get them in our diet. Now, you might be actually surprised to hear that all the essential amino acids are present in plant foods, but some plants are low in 1 or 2 amino acids. Let's have a look at some amino acids and in which foods you can find them in high levels. For example, histidine can be found in rice, wheat, and potatoes, valine in beans and spinach, tryptophan in oats and sweet potatoes, threonine in leafy greens, raisins, and watercress, phenylalanine in beans, rice, and avocado, methionine in sunflower seed and hemp seeds, lysine in beans and chia seeds, isoleucine in oats and lentils, and lastly, leucine in avocados, raisins, and dates. There are some plant sources such as soya and corn, And they contain all the essential amino acids in the right amount to meet human requirements. Next, I want to tell you a bit about the idea of protein combining. In 1971, Frances Moore Lapp wrote in her book Diet for a Small Planet that plant foods are deficient in some of the essential amino acids. And she said that those who don't consume animal products need to eat a combination of certain plant foods at the same time in order to get all the essential amino acids in the right amount. And that is how the protein complementing theory was created. Later, Lapp, who was not a nutritionist, she did apologize. She also retracted her statement, but you can imagine by then it was too late. Even now, many textbooks, as well as healthcare and fitness professionals, talk about protein complementing. And you often hear them say that their vegan clients have to combine foods, like bread with peanut butter or rice with beans. I know we often eat those foods in that very combination, but we don't need to. It is a myth. And the myth was dispelled in the 1990s by two expert nutritionists on protein, Vernon Young and Peter Peletta, in their paper called Plant Proteins in Relation to Human Protein and Amino Acid Nutrition, which was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They refuted the protein complementing myth. So as long as vegans eat a variety of plant protein sources, they'll be fine because we humans hold a pool of amino acids. And also bear in mind that the nitrogen balance happens over 24 hours, and it doesn't depend on what we eat in one single meal. Basically, our body takes the digested proteins that we consume throughout the day, it breaks them down and takes the individual amino acids it needs and reassembles them into complete proteins. So what about omega-3 fatty acids if we don't consume fish? There are three important omega-3 fatty acids: alpha-linolenic acid, ALA. Then we have EPA and DHA. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the last two because they're a bit of a mouthful. So humans cannot make the short-chain fatty acid ALA, and we must get it from our diet. ALA is then converted in the body to the long-chain fatty acids DHA and EPA. Vegan sources of ALA include flaxseed, chia seeds, hemp seeds, and walnuts. In fact, a tablespoon of ground flaxseed is enough to get the recommended daily intake for ALA. The predominant dietary source of DHA and EPA is fish, but fish don't make it. They get their DHA and EPA from algae. So humans can get theirs directly from algae. There are algae supplements, but there's also the ahi flower supplement, which provides DHA. So that is also an option for your clients. Now, we know that some people are not good at converting the long-chain fatty acid ALA to the short-chain fatty acids DHA and EPA. In fact, there have been several studies that show that vegans or those on a plant-based diet have lower blood levels of omega-3 fats compared to omnivores. However, a review of literature conducted by Mayo Clinic in 2016 revealed that the low levels of EPA and DHA don't have any adverse health effects. So there is really no convincing evidence that we need to worry about the low levels of omega-3 fatty acids in vegans. But if your client is concerned, they can take an algae-based supplement. In fact, supplements are recommended in those with increased needs, such as pregnant and breastfeeding women, and those who may not convert efficiently because of an underlying disease. So if your client suffers from diabetes, metabolic syndrome, or hypertension, then supplementation might actually be a good idea. There's also a concern about getting enough iron if we cut out meat from our diet. Iron is an essential component of hemoglobin, and as a component of myoglobin, iron supports muscle metabolism and healthy connective tissue. Iron is also necessary for physical growth, neurological development, cellular functioning, and synthesis of some hormones. Iron deficiency is actually one of the most common nutritional deficiencies in the world. We know from different surveys that women are more affected than men. For example, in the UK, 46% of girls and 23% of women have low iron intakes. We distinguish between heme iron and non-heme iron. Plants only have non-heme iron, whereas 40% of iron in animal products is heme, and the rest is non-heme. It is true that heme iron is more bioavailable than non-heme iron, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Excess iron in body is oxidized, and that can cause damage by creating free radicals. Non-heme iron, however, is absorbed slowly, and that's why we often see healthy vegans with lower levels of ferritin. Ferritin stores iron. So serum ferritin levels are inversely proportional to absorption, meaning the lower the ferritin levels, the higher the absorption. And this is a self-regulating process, which is beneficial because it prevents iron toxicity. In the UK, the recommended daily intake is 8.7 milligram. However, menstruating women need 14.8 milligram a day. I was quite surprised when I found out that the main source of iron in the UK are actually fortified cereal foods and not red meat. And this is because of white flour, which by law needs to be fortified with iron and calcium. Red meat only provides 15 to 20% of iron intake in the UK. And as for plant sources of iron, legumes are the best. 1 cup of cooked lentils has 6.6 milligram of iron. Other iron sources in a vegan diet are nuts, seeds, green vegetables, and molasses. In fact, 2 tablespoons of molasses provides 3.8 milligram of iron. The absorption of non-heme iron can be reduced by the presence of phytates and tannins in our meals. As you know, legumes contain phytates, so we can reduce some of those phytates by soaking legumes. Also, high pressures that are used when canning legumes reduce some of the phytates. And then by rinsing the canned beans, we can get rid of some more. Tannins are found in coffee and teas, but even some herbal teas can contain tannin. So advise your client not to drink tea 1 to 2 hours before and after meals to improve iron absorption. High calcium can also affect the iron absorption. So if your client is taking a calcium supplement, tell them not to take it with their meals. There are also some nutrients that can improve non-heme iron. Vitamin C is one of those nutrients. It can increase iron absorption 2 to 6 times. And luckily, many plant foods already contain vitamin C. So vitamin C needs to be consumed at the same time with iron in the meal. There is also evidence that onions and garlic can increase the availability of iron from grains and legumes by 50%. Also, some phytochemical components from ginger can increase iron absorption. So by giving some simple tips to your client, like adding ginger or onion and garlic to their meals, you can help your clients to improve their iron intake from their diet. But bear in mind that iron supplements may be needed for pregnant and breastfeeding women, but that advice obviously applies to non-vegans as well. Next on the list is calcium. Dairy is considered one of the best sources of calcium and as such is important for strong bones. And a commonly asked question is, where do vegans get their calcium if they don't drink dairy milk? Calcium is a building block for bones. In fact, 99% of the total calcium in our body can be found in the bones. But calcium also plays an important role in muscle function and nerve transmission and also formation of some hormones. Calcium is a mineral that is found in the soil and it is then absorbed into the roots of plants. The calcium absorption from plants is better, and there is research showing that there is no association between high cow's milk consumption and increased bone mineral density. And although dairy consumption improves peak bone mass in teenagers, it is not associated with lower risk of fractures later in life. In fact, there is evidence that suggests that high dairy consumption is associated with a high risk of fractures. And this is believed to be because of the presence of galactose, which causes oxidative stress and chronic inflammation. The recommendation for adults in the UK is 700 milligram of calcium per day. And although calcium intake might be low in vegans, it is still within the recommended 700 milligram. Breastfeeding women and those suffering from celiac disease, osteoporosis, and irritable bowel disease, they do need higher doses. Common sources of calcium in plant-based diet are beans, kale, broccoli, collard green, nuts, and oats. Here is a list of some foods with the calcium content. You can have a look at it later and use it for your reference. Also bear in mind that many of the plant-based milks are fortified with calcium, and often they provide the equivalent calcium to dairy milk. And because the soya, almond, oat, or any other nut used in the plant milks are soaked and diluted with water, the phytate in those foods doesn't actually inhibit the calcium absorption. There is some concern about the bioavailability of calcium from plants. Now, we absorb about 32 to 34% of calcium in dairy products, and that can be compared to 31% for tofu and 20 to 28% from legumes and soy milk. However, we absorb about 40 to 70% calcium from dark green leafy vegetables like kale, broccoli, Chinese greens, and mustard greens. Some greens like spinach and beet greens, which are high in calcium, but they're also high in oxalates. And oxalate binds with calcium, and as a result, the calcium absorption from these foods is reduced. And it's also worth taking the time and telling your clients that in order to keep our bones healthy, we need more than calcium. We also need magnesium, vitamin D, vitamin K. Furthermore, weight-bearing exercises and maintaining healthy body weight are important factors in keeping our bones healthy and strong. So next is iodine. Iodine deficiency is still a problem in the UK. Iodine is essential for fetal brain development, and deficiency can cause brain damage and cretinism. It's also an essential component of the thyroid hormones thyroxine and triiodine-threonine. So low levels of iodine can actually cause thyroid dysfunction and goiter. The main source of iodine in the UK is cow's milk, and as people are starting to drink less dairy milk, they may be at risk of not getting enough iodine. This is especially a concern among teenage girls and young women. But it is worth to know that dairy products don't naturally contain iodine. Iodine is actually added to the feeds of dairy cows, and also farmers use iodine-based solutions to clean the teats and udders of the dairy cows, and they disinfect the milking equipment with iodine-based solutions. So that's how the iodine gets into the dairy milk. There are plant sources of iodine, such as navy beans, peanuts, and seaweed, as well as any fruits and vegetables which is grown in iodine-rich soil. However, as you can imagine, the level of iodine in fruits and vegetables is not reliable because it depends on the iodine level in the soil. It is recommended that vegans consume iodine in small but frequent amounts several times a week rather than a large dose infrequently. One way is adding a strip of kombu seaweed, which is also known as kelp, to the water while you cook your beans. But just bear in mind that there are some types of seaweed which should be avoided because of the potential arsenic contamination. So safe options are arami, nori, and wakame. As a general rule, we can say that 1.5 to 2 nori sheets provide the recommended daily intake. And there are also a few plant milks that are fortified with iodine. So that is also an option for your vegan clients. And if they prefer supplement, there are vegan-friendly iodine supplements on the market, but they shouldn't take more than the recommended 150 microgram, since excess iodine can be actually toxic. And supplementation is definitely a good idea for pregnant women. Vitamin B12. One of the main arguments against a vegan diet is the lack of vitamin B12 in plants. However, it's not just vegans who need to worry about their B12 levels. Vitamin B12 is required for proper red blood cell formation, neurological function, and DNA synthesis. B12 has a long half-life, so it always depends on how long somebody hasn't taken B12. And unfortunately, a mild deficiency can be masked by high folic acid intake. And we know that high folate intake is quite common in vegans. Long-term mild B12 deficiency can cause neurological damage. However, it is worth noting that it is very rare. Vitamin B12 is made by bacteria in the soil. And in order for bacteria to produce B12, the soil needs the mineral cobalt. But because of intensive overfarming, the quality of soil is declining and there is lack of cobalt in the soil. Besides, our hygienic lifestyles means that we wash up fruits and vegetables and soil is removed. And with that, the bacteria is removed. As you see, animals don't produce B12. Supplements are added to the feeds of the factory farmed animals, and dairy products are fortified. So we all need to watch our B12 levels. In the UK, 6 to 12% of adults under the age of 60 are B12 deficient. 20% of people over 60 years of age and 30% of pregnant women suffer from B12 deficiency. So there are certain groups that are at risk of not getting enough vitamin B12, and yes, that includes vegans, but also vegetarians who don't consume large amounts of fortified dairy products. Also elderly people, pregnant women, alcoholics, or people suffering from anorexia nervosa, they are all at risk of low B12 levels. We also need to bear in mind that B12 absorption can be inhibited by certain drugs such as a proton pump inhibitor, so omeprazole and lansoprazole, H2 receptor antagonists, ranitidine and cimetidine, and also metformin and oral contraceptives. There are fortified plant milks and nutritional yeast that contain B12, but it's always better to take a supplement to ensure adequate intake. The recommended daily intake is 15 microgram per day or 2000 microgram per week. And make sure to tell your clients that they need to have annual blood tests. They really need to keep an eye on their B12 levels to avoid any deficiency. Next nutrient we need to be aware of is vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency is a problem in all population in the UK. According to the National Diet and Nutrition Survey, 23% of adults have low vitamin D status. And in winter months, that number increases to 40%. Vitamin D is needed for healthy bones because it promotes calcium absorption in the gut. But it is also important for neuromuscular and immune function, and also for reduction of inflammation. The natural source of vitamin D is sunlight, but for many of us, exposure to sunlight has reduced to such an extent that our skin cannot produce adequate amount of vitamin D. So people who have limited sun exposure, they can get vitamin D from fortified foods and fish. Vegans can also get their vitamin D from fortified foods. However, that is often not enough to meet the recommended intakes. A report of EPIC Oxford in 2011 showed that vegans had a lower vitamin D status, even though they were not deficient. In general, 15 minutes of sunshine is enough for most people to get the recommended daily requirement. But obviously, some people are more at risk, so like people of darker color and the elderly, and they should even consider taking a supplement. In fact, the NHS actually recommends that everyone takes a supplement from October until March and April when there isn't enough sunlight. Remember, there are two forms of vitamin D. We have D2 and D3. D2 is found in plants, whereas D3 is found in animal products and lichen. Some vegans expose mushroom to UV light to increase their vitamin D2, and that would work if they also get some exposure to sunlight. However, they might still need a vitamin D3 because vitamin D2 is less effective. There are many vegan vitamin D3 supplements on the market, so advise your client to take a supplement if the sun exposure is limited or if they are in a high risk group. The NHS recommends 10 micrograms of vitamin B per day, but Brenda Davies, she's an experienced plant-based nutritionist, and she recommends 25 to 50 micrograms per day for vegans. Last nutrient I want to discuss is zinc. Zinc is an essential mineral, and it is involved in a range of cellular metabolism. It plays a role in immune function, wound healing, and DNA synthesis. Zinc also supports normal growth and development during pregnancy, childhood, and adolescence. And it is crucial for male reproductive health. The amount of zinc in plants depends on its levels in soil. Small traces of zinc can also be found in ocean water, and that is where oysters get their zinc from. Other animal products contain zinc because supplements are added to their feed. Now, in the UK, the recommended intake is 7 milligrams for women and 9.5 milligrams for men. According to the 2016 National Diet and Nutrition Survey, 6% of adults don't meet those recommendations. 22% of teenage girls and 7% of teenage boys have low zinc levels. The EPIOXO study in 2016 showed that vegans have a slightly lower zinc intake than meat eaters. So it was 8 milligram in female vegans compared to 11 milligram among female meat eaters, and 11 milligram in male meat eaters compared to 9 milligram in vegan men. Plant sources of zinc are legumes, nuts, seeds, and tofu. 2 tablespoons of tahini contains 2.8 milligram of zinc. 100 gram of tofu has 2 milligram of zinc. And 100 gram of corn pieces provide 7 milligram, which is the daily recommended amount for adult women. If the zinc levels are low, the body's ability to absorb zinc becomes more efficient. There are concerns with plant sources of zinc because plant foods like beans, grains, and nuts, they contain phytates. But as I mentioned before, the way we prepare our foods, through fermentation, soaking of legumes and whole grains, and sprouting, by doing all of that, we can actually reduce some of the phytate and improve our zinc absorption. Thank you for taking the time to watch this webinar. I hope you found it useful and that it will help you in consulting your vegan clients. My email address is here. Feel free to email me if you have any questions or if there is something that you'd like to discuss in more details. I also invite you to visit the website of Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, where you can find further information on plant-based diets. There are also useful fact sheets you can download for your own private use or to hand out to your vegan clients. Thank you.